Hello, welcome back. Today we're going to talk a very short topic about multiplication factors because this will tie in with other things we do with percents and with ratios and a little bit with the equation solving we did in the previous module. Before we do, what did the clothesline say to the wet laundry? Hang around and we'll find out. No, that's not what he said. You need to hang around to the end of the video and we'll find out what the clothesline said to the wet laundry. Okay, multiplication factors. 2 to 8. I want to change 2 into 8 by multiplying. So again, we know our times tables. 2 times what's 8? Obviously, 2 times 4 is 8. So that's my multiplication factor, right? Sometimes we use the letter K for multiplication factor. My multiplication factor is 4. Okay. Another example here, 10 into 5. Okay. 10 times what? Again, I'm talking about a multiplication factor is 5. Well, the answer is a half, isn't it? Because 10 times a half is 5. So my K in this case is a half. Again, these we just sort of know, right? They just sort of, the answer appears in your head because we know our times tables really well. But let's think about what's going on because they're not always going to be nice times tables answers. So how can I work out 2 times what is 8? Well, I can do 8 divided by 2, which happens to be 4. That's how we can find the multiplication factor. Let's look at the second one. 10 times what is 5? Well, I can do 5 divided by 10, which happens to be a half. So this is how we can find the multiplication factor because this is really what's going on, right? If 2 times 4 is 8, right? Well, what does that mean? That implies that 8 divided by 2 is 4, or 8 divided by 4 is 2. Remember, division is the reverse. Sometimes in math we call it the inverse function of multiplication. Okay, what about 3 into 3? What's our multiplication factor that changes 3 to 3? Obviously, it's times 1. Right? And if I wanted to work it out, it would be 3 divided by 3, and that has the answer of 1. And that's how I worked out what K is. So in this case, K is 1, or the multiplication factor is 1. What about 7 into 0? What's my multiplication factor? 7 times what is 0? Well, if we weren't sure, we could work it out, right? And do 0 divided by 7, which is 0. So my multiplication factor is 0. 7 times 0 is 0. So K equals 0, or my multiplication factor equals 0. Okay, so those are pretty obvious. What about 16? What's the multiplication factor now? It's probably not just going to come to your head, although hopefully pretty quickly you realize the answer is not going to be a whole number. 16 times 2 is 32, times 3 is 48, times 4 is going to be bigger than 57, so it's somewhere between 3 and 4. How are we going to work out exactly what it is? Well, fortunately, on the ones like these, you're going to have your calculator, but what are you going to do on your calculator? Well, don't forget, what I'm saying is 16 times what? Think about our algebra. 16 times what? Don't know what's happening here. 16 times what is 57? This is what I said. This ties into our algebra. How do we work out what x is? X is 57 over 16. This is what we talked about. How do I find my multiplication factor? My multiplication factor is 57 divided by 16. Now, we have our calculator. So 57 divided by 16. All right, and usually we write these as a decimal, although you could write it as a fraction also. 3.56, you can check it on your calculator, 3.5625. That is my K, that is my multiplication factor. So you see these tie into the algebra we've done. Okay, they tie into our basic multiplication. We're going to be using these for percents later this module, and we'll be using them again for ratios in the next module. So one more. 84 to 28. Okay, it should be obvious it's not a whole number. It should also be obvious that this is going to be a fraction between 0 and 1, right? 84 times 0 is 0. 84 times 1 is 84, which is too big. So we're looking for something between 0 and 1. Now, if we were doing algebra, and you can write this in algebra if you want when you solve these, this is really saying 84 times what? Is 28. And how do we work that out? We divide both sides by 84. We get 28 over 84, right? And even without the algebra, what we were talking about, how do I find the multiplication factor, right? 84 times K is 28. I'm going to do 28 divided by 84. Okay, and we put that in our calculator, and we get 1/3 or 0.3 recurring if we write it as a decimal. This is my multiplication factor, right? We can do it directly, we can do the algebra, but the key is we realize that the inverse of multiplication is division. Okay, so that was quick and dirty, a little bit of review, a little bit of prep for what's coming up. And the only thing we have to answer is, what did the clothesline say to the wet laundry? It said, why don't you hang around for a while? And we will see you shortly.